Cinema of Vampires, looking at the history, the bloodsuckers in film. From comedy to love stories, or horror to family movies, vampires have been immortal in the film industry and continue to have an audience no matter the plot. At the beginning, the role of vampires in film has long been a part of cinema since the early pictures. There has always been a fascination with the pulseless bloodsuckers, and as film has evolved and transformed, the topic of vampires has stayed with it. No matter the genre, or even the own rules of what makes a vampire, there will be an audience to watch every move. Looking at over 100 years worth of movie making, the transformation is incredible of seeing what film can accomplish. Comparing the first appearances of vampires in film and what it is now is interesting and hilarious. Dracula, played by Bela Lugosi in 1931, could easily be the first time a ton of people saw a vampire on the screen.
Now that you have learned what you have learned, it would be well for you to return to your own.
Directed by Todd Browning and Carl Freund, this tale tells the story of Count Dracula as he causes chaos by sucking the blood of young women and turning them into vampires until a vampire hunter comes to stop him once and for all. The story of Dracula has been told and retold many times, but looking back to one of the original roots of the cinema story is important. Though looking back at the history, there is another vampire character that stuck out in film before Dracula took the screen.
May I present my daughter, Mina?
Count Dracula.
F.W. Murnau directed the 1922 German expressionist film Nosferatu. This horror/fantasy film was an adaptation of Dracula, but with a much more gruesome monster that has scared many, but now lives as a SpongeBob SquarePants meme. Variety of genre. No matter what kind of mood you were in, there was always a vampire film that would suit your fancy. Every single genre holds its own vampire film, and it still holds true to the traditional vampire rules. It's rare when a subject so niche is able to broaden its horizons and meets everyone's expectations. In the beginning, most films that featured vampires were characterized as horror films. It completely makes sense when it is a blood-sucking monster, but as time went on, there was a shift in what could be considerably scary. Now, there are even kids' movies like The Little Vampire that features the fanged beings. Looking at comedies, there are a ton that feature vampires. Some popular titles include What We Do in the Shadows, directed by Taika Waititi, which was then turned into a comedy series under the same name. Others include Dark Shadows and one of Netflix's latest releases, Night Teeth, all with vastly different plots but still hold true to the vampire traditions. Looking at the more classic horror portrayals of vampires, there are more than the standard Dracula. A fan favorite is the Swedish film Let the Right One In, directed by Thomas Alfredson in 2008, and later remade in the US in 2010 by Matt Reeves. Then there was the cult classic The Lost Boys in 1987, directed by Joel Schumacher. There are endless examples of films that have featured vampires and stuck with the narrative. Examining the Twilight Saga.
I've never wanted a human's blood so much in my life.
It would be insane to not touch on one of the most successful film franchises ever in cinema. Based on the Saga by Stephanie Meyers, Twilight was an overnight sensation. This 5-film series featuring Robert Pattinson and Kristen Stewart completely took the world by storm with their love story. The first film came out in 2008 and was directed by Catherine Hardwicke. The hype never calmed down after that release. The highest grossing film in the series was the last installment, Breaking Dawn Part 2, which earned over $800 million worldwide. The definition of success for any franchise looking at the numbers. Even when they were recently added onto Netflix, all the films immediately went into the top 10 watches by audiences. For the small handful of people that have dodged their way of not seeing any of the films, here's a brief synopsis of the series. Bella Swan moves in with her father in a small town that she grew up in. On her first day of school, she finds herself fascinated with the mysterious classmate Edward Cullen. Her curiosity gets the best of her and she finds out that he is a vampire. But even with his own caution, she can't help falling in love with him.
I'm not scared of you.
Well, you really shouldn't have said.
There, the story begins as they navigate being together as a human and vampire, while keeping secrets and protecting themselves from nomad vampires. Each film grows richer in the story while also being extremely corny. Nonetheless, it is a well-executed series that most book readers loved just as much. Continued obsession. The real question is, why are we so obsessed with these make-believe creatures? Starting out as dangerous monsters when they were first introduced, but now they are loving and good-looking people.
Because if we get exposed, that all goes away. For all of us.
From my own point of view, I'd like to believe that people are so obsessed with vampires because it is the closest thing that humans have to immortality. Getting over the whole blood drinking and no sunlight, being a vampire is having eternal life. Death is one of the top fears for people, and this is a moment to think that it isn't possible, unless there's a wooden stake lying around. The thought of what you would do if granted immortality is almost too grim than happy.
I know. It gets cold so quickly.
You can live like this? Off the blood of animals?
It's interesting to glamorize vampirism when the reality of it is, a vampire would watch everyone around them die all the time. Death is inevitable for everyone, but what would you do if you had it? Wrap up. There's no doubt in my mind that vampires will never leave the big screen. No matter how films update and transition, the Bloodsuckers will always find their way to make it on screen. It may be because it's harder to glamorize Frankenstein or werewolves, but vampires will have a grip on society forever. Taking a subject that has been repeated so many times, but still finds a way to be fresh and exciting is a rare and wonderful thing. To follow the motto of Hollywood, it is the same, but different.